Thanks so much for joining me. My name is Teresa White. I'm a senior English major, and this is my capstone research project, Politics of Performance in Esmé Weijun Wang's High Functioning. So High Functioning is an essay from Wang's book, which was published in 2019, The Collected Schizophrenias. And in The Collected Schizophrenias, Wang uses the essay format to explore her experience with schizoaffective disorder through different lenses and from different perspectives, while High Functioning, as one of those essays, is centered on her ability or her attempt to inhabit the professional world while living with a psychological disability. If you're not familiar, schizoaffective disorder is one of the 3 diagnoses to which Wang refers to as the schizophrenias. So that would be like in the book title, the schizophrenias. And it's also one that she occasionally refers to as the effed up offspring of bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. But more seriously, it is characterized by hallucinations and delusions alongside mood disorder symptoms. And of course, if you want to know more about that, the internet. I learned from Wang's book that schizoaffective disorder, as you might expect, has a really significant effect on one's life. At various times, she might be dealing with recurring auditory or visual hallucinations, or she might be experiencing a long-lasting delusion. There's actually an essay later on in this book, and for the record, I would recommend that all of you read it, and all of the essays, because they're awesome. But there's an essay later about the majority of a year that she spent under or experiencing Cotard's delusion, which convinced her that she and everyone that she loved is dead. So, big impact on day-to-day life, right? It's an issue of ability. Mental illness and or psychological disability, it's an issue of ability and therefore an issue of ableism, or an issue affected by ableism. So, with that in mind, I elected to look at Wang's book from a disability studies method, or a disability studies perspective, and that means that I am aiming to understand disability from social, political, and cultural, rather than medical perspectives. I want to briefly address the terms that I use, and those were selected with the goals of disability studies in mind. Instead of saying mental illness, I use the term psychological disability. This helps us to demedicalize the experience of disability. And I also use, instead of one or the other, I don't believe that one or the other is better, I use both person with a disability and disabled person. The first is an example of person-first language. You might have heard that term before. And the second is an example of identity-first language. My intention in using both of these terms is to recognize both that Wang's experience with disability does not define her in every way, and also that Wang's experience with disability is very important to her lived experience and is a part of her identity. Also, it's worth mentioning that identity-first language is helpful in the recognition of disability as a political identity. People with disabilities are actually a political group, a political coalition, a group that is capable of political action as a whole. So I wanted to recognize that. And if you're curious, I linked a couple of, or I didn't link, I cited a couple of helpful resources below on that, Katie Obrecht Scholarship, and also, surprisingly, the APA style page helped me in making this decision. So when I looked at the rhetoric in High Functioning, I found ultimately that Wang's posturing as high functioning is an attempt to cope with a disability intolerant world. She makes this choice to attempt to appear as a high functioning person in response to an impossible to win situation. No matter what, she will experience ableism and ignorance, but to be seen as a high functioning disabled person stands to benefit her in a couple of different ways. First, she'll be able to distance herself from other less acceptably disabled people. Think maybe of the screaming homeless man on a bus stereotype. That's something that she references specifically as the type of stereotype from which she would like to achieve the most possible distance. And second, she can, by performing her competence and worthiness, gain acceptance into the disability-phobic professional class. In order to perform this high-functioning persona, she uses certain strategies of persuasion. There is the extreme care and attention towards her appearance. This is not only, I don't know this necessarily from outside research about Wang, this is quite literally included in this essay, how much time and care she puts on her appearance in order to seem, well, higher class, to seem capable, to seem smart and attractive, etc., etc. She also puts a lot of emphasis when she gives public speaking, or when she is public speaking, on her prestigious education, and she also places heavy emphasis on her professional accomplishments. All of this has varying levels of success, I would say, in actually making her seem like a high-functioning disabled person, not least because what even is high-functioning, really? Most people experience differing levels of ability throughout their life, regardless of a diagnosis or a stigmatized condition. So there's that. But ultimately, what I wanted to know is, what is the price that Wang pays for playing this game of trying to seem high functioning? And I found that there is a pretty significant cost. It causes harm because it impedes the development of meaningful solidarity with other disabled people. It causes further marginalization of less acceptably disabled people. It is an impediment to Wang's authenticity as a professional, and it is a denial of an important part of herself, which she feels, and this is understandable, that is best denied if she wants to get ahead professionally. And all of this is not Wang's fault. This is the choice that ableism forces people into. And the truth is, there will be stratification along lines of functionality in the disabled community for as long as disabled people are seen as incapable of meaningful contribution to society. This is unfortunately the game that is set, and this is what people like Wang have to play. So I just want us to all take a moment maybe, about the fact that as academics and emerging scholars, we are actually part of a highly exclusionary tradition, and we have played a role in the oppression of marginalized people for a long time. And we all know that we can do better. I want to assert that we cannot forget about disability in our attempt to move towards justice, because ableism is a human rights issue, and it affects people with psychological disabilities like Wang in ways that most of us are not aware of. We do have a responsibility to center disabled voices, and especially disabled voices of multiply marginalized identities, in the conversation that's happening all over America. And I hope that we can all keep that in mind as we move forward in 2020. Good luck. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. I appreciate your time, and I can't wait to see what everybody else has done.